Happy New Year, everyone. I am going to reveal my top 6 predictions for 2025. Spoiler alert, it's when the S begins to hit the fan. Let's take a look. All right, hello everybody. I am Dr. Chris Martinson to Peak Prosperity. Happy New Year. It's going to be a doozy. So prediction time, and predictions are a good way to be wrong about things, but we're going to make them anyway. And you know me, I don't just predict things, really. No crystal ball. I just analyze the trends. So here's some trends that I think are really going to come into play. But first, let me begin by saying that I've just gone through my usual year-end review of 2024, how I did, how the Peak Prosperity Tribe did this year. I mean, wow, what a year. Aside from the constant parsing of the signs of our times, we did deep investigative dives into the Great Taking, the Trump assassination attempts, and explored the big theory of everything, trying to make sense of it all, covering such foundational materials as fifth-gen warfare, rats in a cage, totalitarianism, demoralization, adjustment reactions, things that help us understand the world around us through a simplified framework. Okay, and the goal as always, was to explore the world with an open mind and continue to hone our ability to see what's true while discovering what's not true. As Mark Twain said, it ain't what you know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. But what he's talking about here, these are delusions. So we have a lot of delusions running around in our society. I'm not just talking about the obvious ones, like a man can be a woman or a woman can be a man. As a biologist, I'm just going to say no to both of those things. Chromosomes are what they are. It's not things like, you can have a nation without having a secure border. I'm talking about some really big, profound delusions, like you can print money and somehow that leads to prosperity, or you can install alternative energy and it's going to work just as good as fossil fuel energy and deliver the same prosperity. We're going to have to poke holes in these major delusions here today. Now, in 2024, I started to redo the crash course, thinking naively, really naively, that putting the content into fewer long-form chapters would be a smart thing to do, but turned out it was not. So, and then, and guess what? Besides that not being a smart thing to do, I had to set other things aside, such as that, because we had the Trump assassination come along, and that required my full attention to properly analyze and report on. Now, in 2025, I'm going to focus on 3 big areas. First, the crash course. Awesome. By the way, if you go to peakprosperity.com, start here, you'll find all our awesome content organized in collections. So you can see the citizens investigation over there to the Trump investigation. You got the COVID reporting, how to survive a nuclear war. Believe it or not, that's a collection of material. The Great Taking, and of course, the crash course. So I'm going to completely redo the crash course, but this time as a drum roll, please. Shorter videos. I know, I'm a genius, right? Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to refocus a lot of my attention on all things financial and economic, with a heavy emphasis on energy, specifically oil, natural gas, uranium, okay? You're going to see a little bit of that here today, but I want people to survive, thrive through this next period of time. And if you understand the economic landscape the way I do, you know that there's a good chance this thing really creates a lot of losers and maybe a few winners. And I'll tell you why I think some areas are going to do better than others. 3, I'm going to do everything I can to help create public support for any and all transformative policies that Trump, Elon, Vivek, RFK Jr. particularly are going to propose. Whatever they want to do, we need some brand new things happening soon and fast. A lot more of this economic content, investing content, all of that. I also run Peak Financial Investing, and I work with Paul Kiker to figure out how to get people into risk-managed portfolios. More on that later. But anything we can do here, the Doge thing, Maha, I think vitamin D, if everybody had vitamin D, this would be a much better nation. We need small modular nuclear reactors pronto. These are all things that I believe we need. So I'm going to help get them advanced if I can. Everything I can do. Please, your help too. Now, this is the year of the crash course, 2025. Remember, in 2008, when I first released the crash course, I said this. I said the next 20 years are going to be completely unlike the last 20 years. Now, I wasn't being kind of vague or wishy-washy. It's like, oh, you gave yourself a 20-year range there. I did, but I know that big, complex systems take time to shift. I know that cultures take time to shift. Attitudes, ideas, they just take time. I judge that our situation is such a mega bubble of fiscal, financial, and psychological delusions that it was going to take some serious time to penetrate our culture's thick skull. And it turns out I seriously underestimated my culture's commitment to ignoring reality. However, as Ayn Rand said, you can ignore reality, but you cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. I think we're going to live by that this year. I think Ayn Rand is going to be proven to be dead nuts on this. Now, as I said in 2008, all those years ago, the longer we ignore reality, the fewer and poorer our remaining options will be. So if, for example, we decide as a culture to ignore the fact that oil and gas are finite and instead wait until it's painfully obvious that we are past our final peak of production before we get serious about finding the next energy source, we're going to be filled with regrets and disappointments. They'll be crying. We're going to think, oh, why didn't we reconfigure our cities and transportation and electrical distribution systems back when oil was $70 a barrel? Things seemed so much easier then, and today at $300 a barrel, they're disappointingly difficult, right? Now, those of you who know me and have been following my work know why that statement is made, and it's because of this chart, right? I'm not confused about why declining net energy is going to create more and more apparent hardship. Okay, now this image right here, this comes from the crash course, the original one, back in 2008. In the ultra important chapter on energy economics, that's chapter 19. There's a link for it right there. All of this, of course, can be found at Peak Prosperity. Now, and if you want to understand this better, and you probably do, go ahead and follow that link and take this course, this chapter. All right. Now, briefly, to sort of unpack this briefly, you and I and everything we know and love about the economy and high living standards that we enjoy, all that because we live in the green zone. Green zone is the surplus energy that's left over after we use energy to get energy. And the way to interpret this chart is that once we use 1 unit of energy to find 1 unit of energy, there's no energy left over for other things. The green zone. This chart would be 100% red, top to bottom. We're currently working our way down through super high surplus energy stuff. Of course, the low-hanging fruit, we did that as a culture, right? As a species. It's what you do, right? The lion chases down the lame gazelle, not the super healthy one. You go after the easy, low-hanging fruit first, not the really difficult high-hanging fruit. We've gone after all the easy stuff, and there's still stuff to go after, but it's not as easy as it was before, okay? So it's really not a mystery. Easy stuff is gone. Now we're going after the harder stuff. It's deeper. It's in tighter, less forgiving rock formations, and it just simply costs more energy to get it out of the ground than it did in prior decades. It's just a fact of life, or geology, or physics if you prefer. This is a fact that's going to be coming roaring back into our consciousness here in 2025. It really ought to have penetrated our consciousness back in 1970. It didn't. Here we are. Okay. Currently, one of the most preposterous, gigantic, enormous delusions being paraded about in the media and across the political stages right now is this idea that we can somehow run all this on solar and wind. Steel foundries, greenhouses, giant cities, refinery complexes, on and on and on, right? It's regularly presented as if shifting away from oil and natural gas and toward wind and solar is just some matter of political will. We just have to decide to do it. It's being blocked somehow by evil oil companies. The truth is, the more solar and wind you install, the more expensive your electricity becomes. We have the data. If we were a data-centric society, we would look at a chart like this where we see cost per kilowatt hour in cents up the y-axis, and then across the x-axis there is the percent of your nation's electricity that comes from solar and wind, with Denmark anchoring right there. The far end almost just over 60%. I've drawn that crude red line in there. You know, I kind of just hand drew that in there as a sort of a way to see the trend in this thing. But look, the conclusion off of this is very simple. It's very easy. The more solar and wind you have as a percent of your energy mix, the more expensive your electricity is. Now, that's not what we've been told, but that's what the data is telling us. And we have lots of data. We have years of data. We have decades of data now. This is absolutely the case. I'm not against solar and wind, right? But I am against them being trotted out as being the star in the play, right? They have the lead role. They can have bit roles, but they can't have the lead role. Not yet, for reasons that should be obvious at this point in time. Now, and these costs right here, these are with extremely generous government incentives and subsidies, okay? And once those are withdrawn, once governments can't afford this folly anymore, this red line is going to get steeper. It's going to demonstrate that actually this stuff is even more expensive than we thought, especially if we include the complete cycle replacement costs. Okay, this is just data, but this is running against popular delusions and the madness of politicians and the media at this point in time. So this is going to be a hard message to get across to some people, but those who can see it early, and that's what I do. I'm an information scout. I like to provide context. Once you understand the story in this way, I think it's possible to make better investment decisions, to figure out where the puck is going to be so you can begin to skate there. Maybe this means changing what you do for work, where your family lives, how you invest. A lot of conclusions come off of charts like this, okay? Now, in one small ray of light, the script writers for Paramount, the Paramount series Landman, good series, by the way. I'm just watching it right now. But when I came across this chunk in Landman, I was like, oh man, we got to talk about this online right away. So listen, Landman centers, that's the title of this thing. It centers on the life of an oil industry landman. Whoever the writers were, they sure understood. Yes, I'm cheering. Oh man, well done, Landman script writers. I mean, they got it right there. The infrastructure, the time, the scale, the cost, how embedded it is and everything. Oil and fossil fuels are like water and we're fish swimming in them. Like we can't see them. This gal can't see them, is a very typical representative of a lot of humanity out there because you've been surrounded by it your whole life. You're like, oh, well, I've been told that we should just get rid of carbon in the atmosphere. So let's glue our hands to roads and pour soup on paintings somehow because oil is bad. Oil is why 90% of people are alive today, because of its role in providing us food and medicine. And if we didn't have that food and medicine and warmth during winter times and cooling during summer times, we would have a lot fewer people around. That's just how it is. So at any rate, good job. But notice what's happening here. We're starting to see these messages coming out in popular culture. So this is good because this is reality starting to come back. When reality comes back in 2025, this is where it all ends and where it all goes. So listen, and this brings me right to my top 6 predictions for 2025. Before I reveal those, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Are you feeling run down, low energy, maybe struggling with extra weight? I don't know, maybe brain fog has you wondering, what's going on? The truth is, it all starts with what we eat. Recent revelations have exposed how our food has been engineered to be addictive, filled with chemicals and additives that Europe bans because, well, they know they're toxic. The results? Rising obesity, type 2 diabetes in children, and other metabolic disasters like cardiovascular issues, heart disease, cancer. Yes, cancer. Garbage in, garbage out. But what can we do? It begins with understanding the problem. And that's why we've created a comprehensive food webinar We'll explore the regulatory failures behind this crisis and provide solutions from experts like Dr. Ken Berry. And we'll talk about the war on farmers and food with voices like Tracy Thurman and Robert Barnes. And we're also bringing testimonials, success stories, and actionable tools, all combined to help you take charge of your health again, because it is time. So let's stop delaying change. It's the new year. Time to get healthy. We all want to do it. Our children, though, deserve eating healthy again, and we instill those patterns in childhood. So we deserve better health. They deserve better health. Everybody deserves better health, and we need to be free from the lies and toxic food pushed on us. Health is your most important form of personal capital, and with the challenges we face, economic uncertainty, supply chain disruptions, who knows what's coming in 2025, even potential conflicts, well, being healthy and resilient is critical, and it starts at home with what we eat. Thank you for listening, and now back to our regular programming. All right, welcome back. Let's turn now to my top 6 predictions for 2025, and here it is. Number one prediction, U.S. oil production tops out. This is going to be a big surprise to a lot of people. Even the EIA, that's the Energy Information Agency of the United States, can barely make the case for extremely weak production growth in 2025. Let's look at this. Here we are, millions of barrels per day up the y-axis across the x. These are years. 2024 is now pretty much in the bag. These little gray bars are showing the average annual. So you can see we went from 12 to 13 to 13 and a half-ish. And here we're getting just a little, just this thing. Can you see what's happening here? Less and less and less. This is an extremely bull case here, because I think I can make a case that we're going to see a lot less than that. The EIA tends to shoot a little high on these things, but here we can see from, this is from Ovi over at Peak Oil Barrel, does great analysis on this stuff. Really admire the analysis Ovi does. And this is looking at, in the green on the top, this is U.S. total oil production. You can see we had the big crash in 2020, almost a straight line growth up here to about 2024. Been bouncing and struggling ever since. And you can see from here of December of 2023, clear through to December of 2025, that's a very different trajectory. That's fairly flat compared to this. Again, this comes from United States STEO, or short-term energy outlook projections. Okay. Now here's why I'm even more bearish than the EIA, and it's because I listened to the analysts over at Garing and Wang. We're going to have Adam back onto the program here. Watch for this in late January. They've got an incredible model for those of you who are into these kinds of things, and or you're a resource investor. You are going to want to listen to this interview. But here's the punchline. They have their predictive models here in the red lines that do an extraordinarily good job of modeling different shale plays. It's very complicated. We'll go into it in more detail in January, but suffice it to say it's a neural model, involves a lot of inputs, involves a lot of experience. And here in the greenish, dark, thicker line is actual production. Wow, that's pretty tight agreement. Here's pretty tight agreement. This is for the Bakken in the Eagle Fords down here, the Bakken in North Dakota. This is their red line prediction. Here's the actual. It's been bouncing around more, but we would expect that, well, possibly the Bakken's past peak here, and as well, Eagle Ford also past its own peak. So with modeling results like that, that's incredible. And so if they are right, the shale growth is over. It's not over, like we don't get any more oil out, but the idea that we can just drill more or higher prices are somehow going to rescue the situation, they've got a compelling case for why that's not true. That's what I'm hanging my hat on. I believe that's the right view of this at this point in time. Now, as well, alternative energy realities begin to set in, right? People finally begin to go, this stuff is unreliable, more expensive. And by the way, when you look at the subsidies that are going into this, it's extraordinarily a lot more expensive than even this, because those subsidies come from the government, which is really you and me. And those represent more deficit spending, which creates higher inflation. So we get what appears to be slightly less expensive energy, but we have to pay more for hamburger and auto insurance. So it doesn't really work out These subsidies, if these things just had to stand on their own, it would be a very, very different story. Now, I get it. Sometimes governments want to, goose production. That's totally fine. But at any rate, we're going to start figuring this out for real, but not before some pain happens. By the way, that's related to prediction number 3. We're going to see a rapid resurgence in and appreciation for nuclear energy, especially 4th generation small modular reactor designs. Here you can see, wow, look, Microsoft bets on SMRs. That means small modular reactor. You see all this stuff is from 2024. Oracle to build SMR-powered gigawatt data center. White paper argues for SMRs over renewables. We're going to see a lot more nuclear coming forward. And again, this has a very powerful investment thesis that underlies it. My prediction for number 4 is that natural gas demand is going to hit trouble in terms of too much demand for the amount of supply. From the EIA again, this is their actual prediction here. This is the average annual for 2022, 2023, 2024, but 2025, this is dead flat. They're not like, well, we don't have a lot more supply. Every molecule of natural gas that comes out of the ground has a destination already. It's not like we just have surplus coming out, like we don't know what to do with it. So whether it's already going into storage for winter use, or it's going into domestic, residential, or commercial buildings, or it's going into industry, or it's being shipped out as LNG, everything coming out of the ground has a use. Now, here's the fun part. Even though the same amount is going to be coming out of the ground this year as in 2023, more or less this next year, demand is going through the roof. Here we just had an announcement from Cheniere Energy here, but saying that they brought on their 3rd train set in an LNG export terminal that's going to take over 10 million tons per annum of LNG. That's what it's going to make. That's going to chew up a lot more supply coming out of the ground in the U.S. You know what else is? Well, Facebook decided that they were going to actually, they're not going to use an SMR for this one. They're going to use natural gas to power this data center. There are data centers popping up all over the place. According to the Department of Energy at the Berkeley Labs, very interestingly, they projected that data centers are going to fully double or more, double, possibly triple their demand on electricity in the United States by 2028. This is extraordinary, going from 4.4% of total U.S. consumption of electrical power to as high as 12%. And they project all of this very big, very long, very detailed report. You know what they didn't do? They didn't tell us where they think all of this stuff is where this electricity is going to come from. I searched natural gas and it appears once and they're just like, we think maybe somebody will use some of that stuff. So I don't think anybody's looking at the big picture. I'm worried about that. I'm worried that there's a lot of individual decisions like put in data centers, put in more data centers, put in a lot of data centers. The electricity will come from somewhere. Markets will figure it out. I don't think that's a good plan. I'm positive it isn't. I'm being coy. All right. Prediction number 5. Interest rates are headed higher, not lower. I know everybody's expecting the Fed to go through cutting cycles and there's going to be lower interest rates. But in fact, what are we seeing here? After 40 years of declining interest rates, we are seeing now interest rates going the other direction. Why would we think this would be just a couple of year process and be done? I don't think that's the case. I'm expecting higher, not lower interest rates through 2025, again, with very profound investment implications for everybody out there. And people who are looking at home buying decisions, home selling decisions, these things are going to have a big impact. And my final prediction is that the recession finally arrives officially. You can see here in the New York Fed recession probability model, we've never had the probabilities be this high without a recession occurring. They think we're going to skate right past it this time. That's because this recession was headed off at the pass with fake statistics and really aggressive government expenditures, mostly by the Biden administration, probably mostly to try and get reelected. We had fake jobs numbers that are getting revised downward. We have fake inflation numbers that should be a lot higher, which subtracts from GDP. If you subtract enough from GDP, surprise, you're in recession. And I believe that there has been an excessive amount of secretive government spending through SFAS 56, which we will look at. But be that as it may, China is leading the way. This is an absolute emergency. It looks like China is imploding here based on their 10-year treasury rates. I don't know what. Anyway, there's something very profound going on over there. So I think that, well, there's a recession coming. All right. Now, for most people, if we do have this recession, this is going to be a pretty rough ride, right? Mainly because they aren't paying attention, right? And they're going to get blindsided by the consequences of ignoring reality and living in a fundamentally delusional world. Obviously, this happened with the COVID jabs, right? People who weren't paying attention, some of them regretted that. Now, CNN, MSNBC, New Wall Street Journal, New York Times, all these things are quick ways to become slowly ignorant. These guys, all of them, they mainly provide, let's be clear about this, air cover for government and corporate policies and programs. And as such, their relentless adherence to propaganda, it misinforms people, explaining probably their obsessive hatred with misinformation, right? Oh, we hate misinformation. We hate that stuff, right? Oh, no. Fake news, social media, the death of truth. Disinformation, even experts don't know how to stop it. Well, in psychological terms, if you spot it, you got it, right? Well, what typically drives people nuts the most, myself included, is the things that they most hate about themselves on a subconscious level, seeing them out there in somebody else, right? That guy's never on time. I had blah, blah, blah. Maybe you're not on time, right? All right. But this is the media, right? This is it. They are the largest purveyors of complete nonsense and lies. And so they put up a big show about wanting to protect feeble minds from misinformation coming from the alt news constellation. Deep down though, media knows that they are culprits spreading dangerous misinformation like this stuff right here. The really sad part, most of these corporate and government programs that media is running a big program, cover program for, these are grifts, they're scams or outright corruption. Right? We're not defending democracy in Ukraine. They don't have any democracy over there. Get out, right? But how about this stuff, right? None of the delusions, none of them are going to be more damaging than energy delusions and misinformation. This stuff is going to really kill. Now, over the long term, access to abundant and cheap energy is the determinant of the vitality of any country's economy. The connection between energy and the economy is both intuitively obvious, right? Intellectually clear, can make the case. You need energy to extract, to make and move things, right? No energy, no things, right? And here they are telling us this delusion about how wind and solar is cheaper, but I just showed you the chart that said, well, the more of the wind and solar you have, the more expensive your energy becomes, not cheaper. How they can't line that, like the reality is in the chart. This is the narrative. This is the propaganda. That's a delusion. A delusion is when reality's over here and your thought pattern is over here, heading in an entirely different direction. All right. Or we could turn to, say, charts like this one from Art Burman. This tells a tale, right? So he says here, oil consumption and GDP had a statistically perfect correlation in 2020, which is a fancy way of saying that these things are inseparable. It would be like saying money deposited in my bank account is statistically perfectly correlated with the amount of money I have. Right? Duh. Of course it is, right? Okay. The green energy delusion, it comes with this steady stream of this corporate and government misinformation, right? Dutifully relayed by the mainstream media as if it were capital T truth itself. And nearly every day, there's another blathering announcement, right? From some politician, about pouring tens of billions into things such as the state of Massachusetts deciding and dedicating maybe $10 billion to grid scale batteries. Oh, it's going to make our electricity costs get really expensive here. Or maybe this, the UK deciding they have to spend another 240 billion pounds of investment into their national green energy goals. All right, peel back the happy talk about this stuff, and you will immediately discover a vast swarm of corruption and enrichment of lobbyists and relatives and political donors What you won't find under these green energy goals is a coherent plan that will provide cheap, reliable energy to the populace. Now, I focus on this particular delusion a lot, the energy delusion, because it's the one that will absolutely crush future prosperity if we get it wrong. And we're not getting it just wrong. We're burning up our dwindling supplies of energy in the process. The more of this we chase, the worse and fewer our options become in the future. Now, as I said, the longer we wait, things just more unpalatable. All right, if we wait long enough, there won't be anything that can be done anymore, right? Except cry about what we should have done if only we'd let thoughtful engineers make the decisions instead of corrupt, ignorant politicians. Be like, oh, that would have been a good idea. Maybe we should have done that. Remember Bob, the engineer? You know? I think he had it right. Not Keir Starmer. Who knew? At any rate, but for people who aren't prepared or aren't willing to become prepared, and this mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, right? If they aren't willing to become prepared, well, they tend to bounce off of my messages, my presentations, kind of like an unrepentant alcoholic at a surprise intervention, right? Just they're not ready for it. Now, for the astute, however, there are plenty of opportunities to become more resilient, right? More resilient, more mentally, spiritually prepared, even financially wealthier. This is all possible at a minimum. There is no need for the resulting hardships to translate into literal starvation, broken spirits, poverty. Now, for far too many of the people out there, those things I just mentioned, you're like, oh, Chris, that sounds apocalyptic. I don't know. Well, we just found out that actually this is already a reality for far too many people, with homelessness surging by 18%. It was already at painfully high record levels in the United States. It surged by 18%. Another gigantic 1/6, advance of the number of people out there. It's just, ugh. And they say amid a lack of affordable housing, like it's this thing that just happens. We don't know. It's where did our affordable housing go? It ran into the bushes. No, the Federal Reserve as a policy made housing more expensive. It was a policy of theirs because they like financial assets. They consider houses financial assets heading up and to the right. That's what the Fed likes. And it results in this. So this is a policy decision. But that delusion around energy and around monetary policy, it results in real harm to real people. That's why I do what I do. That's why I'm intrigued by the possibility of what's possible with the new administration coming in, because maybe we can get reality back at the table here. Now, at Peak Prosperity, we preach the benefits of becoming more resilient. The 4 core areas we focus on are home, health, wealth, and community. And each of these is an entire subject all on its own. I don't have time for here, with subsets and plenty of actions to take, things to learn under there. But you want to build up your capital in each of those areas. There they are. Wealth, health, home, community. So it's just absolutely time to increase your resilience, build up your capital in each of these areas here, and you will weather the storms way better than people who don't, right? And so naturally at Peak Prosperity, we have a huge body of resources to help everyone become more resilient. Many of these things do not require money, right? Learning skills does not necessarily require money. Money can help you learn skills faster usually, but it's not necessary. Anybody, anytime they want, can decide to learn how to do things. So it's part of it. Community, again, you can do that entirely without cash. I'm not even sure cash helps that at all. Becoming resilient, though, I want to be clear about this. It's a process, right? It takes time. Doesn't have a goal line. There's no destination on the resilience map labeled done, right? You're there. Once you've decided how resilient you want to be, that's great. You give yourself permission, however, to adjust those levels over time, given the news, given circumstances in your life. Earlier this fall of 2024, I got very concerned looking at signs of imminent nuclear warfare, so I dialed things up around getting prepared for that. And now I think it's changed a little. I'm a lot less worried about that right now. I don't know if that's wise or not, but that's the point. Your resilience can come and go. Your preparations dial up, dial down. That's the invitation. Please give yourself permission So take as much time as you need. Okay. Now, let's get to predicting the future. As I gave you my 6 predictions, but you know what? Those are painfully easy to predict what's come next. You don't need a crystal ball, no magic crystal ball. All you need to be able to do is extrapolate the trend that's already traveling in a specific direction. Now, politicians and mainstream media, being energy ignorant, will not only overlook the importance of cheap, abundant energy for your and my prosperity, but they will continue to do the wrong things in service to a carefully developed green energy delusion. They've spent a lot of money on the green energy delusion. So they're going to keep doing that. That's the prediction. The fact that more of their citizens are slipping into poverty and homelessness with every new generation of alt energy projects, it's not even going to register in their minds as connecting those dots. They won't be able to do it. What does this have to do with that? We have homelessness and we have these beautiful wind turbines over here. I don't get it, right? It's not hard to connect those dots, but it is if you're ignorant, and most people at the leadership level are energy ignorant. They're money ignorant. They have no idea how any of this stuff works. Crash Course helps sort of set that frame so you can understand how these pieces come together. And they do. They really do. Now, for its part, the Federal Reserve and the other central banks, they're going to find even more excuses to try and paper over the issues and misery with more money printing. All right. That's what they do. To the central banksters, to rhyme with gangsters, the central banksters' financial assets must always be growing exponentially up and to the right. This chart of the NASDAQ 100, good visual of their handiwork. This is how they operate. It's just like they just want that happening forever. And but you want to take a look at this, see how this chart really begins to take off right here after 2008. We had this little downturn right here. Remember, that's the great financial crisis. You can barely see it on this overblown, the hyper response to that great financial crisis, which is that right there. That was the worst time ever. Oh no. And so they freaked out and did this, and off we go, right? All right, but you see how it takes off right there, right around that 2008 financial crisis, right after it bottoms in 2009? See that? Now we're going up like this in this almost perfectly exponential fashion. Now, how did that happen? Well, obviously, this is easily resolved if all we have to do is take a look at this. This is a log chart, okay? Log chart, meaning this is an exponential chart already. So a straight line on a log chart is an exponentially growing line on a regular linear chart. Okay, this is a log chart of central bank financial assets. And as you can see, look at this. It's just growing like since 2008. It was just a steady exponential growth of central bank assets with this giant, who even knows what the heck happened here for COVID. And now they are wobbling them down a little bit, but this is an extraordinary thing. From 2007 here, we went from about 3.3 trillion to up here 2022, when inflation really started to bite badly. We went up to about 25 to 27 trillion. I mean, it's just, what? This is crazy. And so how does a central bank get assets? Very simply, they print money out of thin air, and they don't even print anything. They clack keys and create fantasy currency digits, and then they buy stuff like government debt, mortgage-backed securities, things, debt. They buy debt with it. All right. So that's banking. But I mean, if you want to know why your groceries cost more, look at this chart. That's it. You want to know why financial assets exploded higher? Look at this chart. This one right here. This explains the whole thing, right? You want to know why the future's going to suck? Take a look at this chart. Okay. Either the central banks, this is it. They're caught right now. Either they reel back all that printing, right? They cause a massive deflationary depression. Everybody hates them. Not going to happen. Or they continue their favorite practice of printing more and more and more at every emergency, which are all actually events created by them in the first place. All right. This is an easy call to make. Central banks are going to print more. That's what they're going to do. It's what they do. And after an entire generation of really kind of doing all that, only that's all they know how to do anymore. I don't think there's anybody working there that doesn't know that this is how it is, right? So it's, and these efforts, all this money printing, by the way, it's only becoming less and less effective over time and creating larger and larger negative effects, right? Like politically toxic levels of inflation, concentrated wealth in the hands of activist homicidal billionaires like Bill Gates, a political class that no longer even has the slightest clue what a balanced budget would look like, let alone how one might go about negotiating one. They just don't, they lack that muscle memory. Now, for those that know what's coming, steps can be taken to avoid the resulting inflation and the many economic dysfunctions that are coming from this chart right here. All right. For those who are simply playing the game, right? Keep your head down, doing a good job, do what you do, play by the rules, do 401k monthly contributions on autopilot. Well, I'm just not sure that there's going to be enough future Walmart greeting jobs to go around. This is going to immiserate people because that's what money printing always does. Just that's how it goes. Now, having a true risk-managed approach to portfolio management is one of the things that everybody with wealth most needs to help them get through the eye of this needle that's coming. And most people have the exact opposite of that. They have a passive exposure to financial markets, right? For the most part. Retirement portfolios, they can be self-managed. Exposure to gold and silver is a must, as well as other hard assets such as oil, natural gas, farmland, woodland, mining. We cover all of those options here at Peak Prosperity. Again, these are all resources that can help you. This is a retirement portfolio approach, a self-directed retirement fund here. I have one. Love my EQRP with Damien's company, Peak Financial Investing, to talk to financial advisors who have a risk-managed approach, not a passive approach to wealth investing. Gold and silver, Gold Core, I love them for their storage, etc. Now, here's why I care about this. You know what? It's never different this time. It never is. You know why I'm 100% confident that money printing does not, will not lead to prosperity? Because money is not actual wealth. It's a claim on wealth. Real wealth consists of real things, and those only ever arise from the productive efforts of people using energy. Maybe food energy to power our bodies, maybe oil energy to power the machines and the trucks. Money printing, that's not the same thing as oil coming out of the ground. Money is a claim on things. It's not real things itself. Again, this is a longer conversation to be had in the crash course. I got whole chapters on this, but once you know, right? It's definitely worth your time to watch the chapters on money in the crash course, because once you get this concept of what real wealth is, what primary, secondary, tertiary wealth is, what the role of money actually is, and what debt really is, you'll be able to more clearly identify the true sources of actual wealth in your life and in your portfolio, right? Now, to believe that central banks have magically unlocked the capacity to print up real wealth out of thin air, you have to believe in the most enduring investment delusion of them all, which is it's different this time. You know what? It's not different this time. It never is. It never is. It never is. Fundamentals matter. Currency units created out of thin air, out of literal nothingness and backed by the same debts that they enable in the first place. Oh, that's no way to go through life, son. Right? You can't create currency units out of nothing, backed by the same debts that those currency units gave you in the first place. It's nonsense. It's just nonsense. All right. All right. Listen, if it did work, if there was a way to print your way to prosperity, you and I, everybody, we'd all be speaking Latin, because the Romans they were exceedingly clever people, right? They tried the currency debasement route over and over and over again, and it didn't work. They kept doing it until everything collapsed. If it could have been done, the Romans would have gotten it done, right? After perfecting cement that cures, even while being poured in salt water, building roads that are still being driven on 2,000 years later. Our road falls apart every 5 years out where I live, right? It needs resurfacing. Figuring out currency debasement should have been like child's play to the Romans. And you know what? They tried it. And you know what? Didn't work. Didn't work then. Won't work now. You want to know why it won't work now? Because it rests on the delusion that money is the real thing in the equation, not the real stuff that money can buy. It's a completely upside down delusion. It's got it exactly backwards. And we're going to relearn that lesson. The money isn't the wealth. It's just the claim on the real wealth. The real wealth is the real wealth. The money is just this figurative, abstract marker that's supposed to be in balance with the real stuff. All right. So this is going to be a very exciting 2025. All right. Let's start here. Let's join forces. Let's become healthier and wealthier, more well connected to each other. Let's live in resilient homes. My commitment is to continue to be your information scout. It's what I'm uniquely qualified and built to do. All right. And together, we'll figure all this craziness out. All right. But let's not pretend that a white knight is somehow going to appear, grab the reins, and steer the chariot of fate in a better direction. And I've been at this, feels like nearly 20 years. I guess it's 17 years now. And we're still just as far from the most basic of energy and money understandings among those in power as we have ever been. The fantasies and delusions are as powerful and as pervasive as ever. Look, 2025 is the year that the chickens are going to come home to roost. I said the next 20 years are going to be completely unlike the last 20 years. Well, that brings us from 2008 to 2028. I mean, we are right on schedule for all of this stuff. And I just don't see any way to avoid what's coming. And I do believe that this year, 2025, is when we begin this process. From here, 2025 to 2030 is going to be an absolutely rough ride. And the reason for that, sadly, is because we failed as a society, as a culture, to lionize the people who should have most been in power. We should have had the most thoughtful engineers. We should have had the most daring doctors at the front of these things. The people who should have been rewarded during COVID got punished. The people who should have gotten punished got rewarded. That is painfully true. It's equally true when we look at those things in terms of energy policy, monetary policy, etc. And again, you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. That's what's coming home to roost. So I want you to join me, please, at Peak Prosperity, if you're not already a member there, and join the conversation, because our goal, our whole tribe, everything that we're about is becoming resilient, because this doesn't have to be a complete unmitigated disaster for everybody. I think it's going to be painful for a lot of people, no question about it. I think a lot of people don't want to know, can't know, are unwilling to know about what's coming, and that's fine, and that's what it is, but that doesn't mean you have to swirl the bowl with them. So context is everything. Look, I might have it all wrong. I might not. The point is to have the conversation, dispense with it, and then you decide what's right and appropriate for you, and that's all I care about. You decide what's actually working in your best interest. But I'll serve it up. We'll get this conversation going, and we'll start with fundamental truths that we know are enduring and build from there and use those as a springboard for capturing intellectual territory so we can know what to do and when, why, how. With that, thank you very much for listening. I'm Chris Martinson at Peak Prosperity. Please come on by and check it out. We have some great offerings, and 2025 is going to be a ripper of a year. Bye for now.